Hey everyone, it's Tobes, and welcome to your second monitor. It's Pride. Magic Presents Pride is a commander event that Wizards of the Coast is doing again this year. This is the second year they've done it in a row, but this year we have actual prize support, which looks like this Chromatic Lantern promo card featuring Nico Aras. I think that's pretty sweet. The event is going to be happening June 27th through 29th, one of those days, which, keep in mind, that is this coming weekend as of this video's airing, in one of these lovely countries. So check with your FLGS and see if they're running it. And if they aren't, ask them why, ask them to run it. Even if they didn't sign up in time for you to be able to get these Chromatic Lantern promos, ask them to run it anyway. They should be able to have other promos they can provide to you. And in any case, it's a pretty fun event. I had a good time with it last year. It's worth playing in, promos or not. And the more they hear it, the more likely they are to run it either this year or next. So what is the event? It's pretty simple. You build a commander deck, and you treat all eligible commanders as though they had the partner ability. As of airing, we know that what makes a commander an eligible commander is about to change with Edge of Eternities. But this is what it is right now, so we just stick with these. You can put any two commanders together in the same deck, both in the command zone, whether or not they actually have partner or partner with or Friends Forever, Doctor's Companion, choose a background, anything like that. They can share the command zone together because anyone can be with anyone. It's Pride. You can't use any of those abilities I just mentioned to go beyond two commanders in the zone, but it gives you a lot of flexibility and a lot of cool options for what you can do. I've been showcasing some partner commander combinations throughout this month, so let's get started with today's commanders. This is Halana and Alena and Kynaios and Tiro all in the command zone, and the deck is called Magic is for Everyone. So our commanders, as you may expect, are Halana and Alena partners and Kynaios and Tiro of Miletus. I'm going to go into them in just a moment, but first we're going to talk about my breakdown for how I build commander decks so you understand the philosophy behind this. I like to build around the commander, or in this case commanders, and rather than just build a commander deck that has good synergies or a game plan and having just support in the command zone or just, a commander that gives me the colors I want to showcase what the actual commander or commanders do. So that's how I build these things. Mechanically, what I like to do is about 30 cards, which are my game plan. It's the thing the deck is trying to do. And then 30 more cards divided into about 10 cards per slot, split between card advantage, sometimes mostly draw, ramp cards, and interaction. So about 10 card advantage, 10 ramp, 10 interaction. I'll usually do a Wrath or two, sometimes a little more, sometimes none. And then I do about 38 lands, just because I want to be able to hit my land drops. So again, 30 cards in the game plan, 30 cards of support between card advantage, ramp, and interaction, maybe a Wrath or two, and then 38 lands. So let's talk about these commanders, and then we'll talk about what the deck is trying to do. Starting with Halana and Alena, who I will refer to for the rest of the video as the Gruul Friends, and I'm going to talk about Kynaios and Tiro as the Gay Kings. These are the common nicknames I've heard for these cards, and I think they're cute, so I'm going with it. So the Gruul Friends are a red and a green for a 2/3 human ranger with first strike and reach. That says at the beginning of combat on your turn, put X +1/+1 counters on another target creature you control, where X is the Gruul Friend's power, and that creature gains haste until end of turn. So obviously, I'm sure you can guess, we want to take Halana and Alena and put counters on them. They can't put counters on themselves, but we have lots of ways to increase their power otherwise, because their power is the number of counters we're putting on other things. So we want to spread the love around. As for Kynaios and Tiro of Miletus, the Gay Kings, they are a 2/8 human soldier for a red, a green, a white, and a blue. That says, at the beginning of your end step, draw a card. Each player may put a land card from their hand onto the battlefield, then each opponent who didn't draws a card. So for us, what this means is growth spiral. We draw a card, and then we may put a land from our hand onto the battlefield, because it says each player may, it's not just our opponents. So we draw and put a land in if we want to. For every other player at the table, they can either make a land or play a land, even though it's not making a land drop. They can put a land into play, or they can draw a card. They get the choice. Despite the wording, they are allowed to not put a land in play, even if they have one in their hand, so don't get confused there. The Gay Kings are a classic group hug commander. They want everyone to enjoy themselves. And that's perfect for this deck, because Magic is for everyone. So, let's talk about what we're doing with this deck. This is a Legends deck. I've envisioned this as Halana and Alena and Kynaios and Tiro are all living in the same apartment, which is getting a little crowded, but it has plenty of space for everyone, and they're having a big party. So this deck is, our couples have invited a lot of unique folks to the party, and everyone's only gotten stronger for it. We have a mess of counter synergies to take advantage of the Gruul Friends combat trigger, as well as a lot of draw and landfall synergies to benefit from the Gay King's instep trigger. Everybody is welcome here. So we're a little bit group huggy, to do a little salute to Kynaios and Tiro. And we have multiple cards that increase or remove maximum hand size because we are making space for everyone. So this is Magic is for Everyone. Let's get into it. Our game plan begins with the Legends. Let's walk through them. These are, as usual, in mana value order. So we're starting off with a Doctor Who legend, which is K9 Mark 1. I have not watched Doctor Who, but I trust that this little robot dog, which is a 1/1 for a blue, is a good boy. K9 has a couple of abilities. Its Doctor's Companion ability is not relevant for this, so the first ability says, as long as K9 is untapped, our other legendary creatures have Ward 1. So this is one of the few ways we have to protect our things in this deck. The other ability is for 1 and a blue and tap. Target legendary creature can't be blocked this turn. So this is one of our evasion abilities. K9 is just a very good dog. K9 is an artifact, which can be relevant to us. Seems good. We have a few legends in this section that are non-creatures, but we have a few other creatures to sort of balance it out. Right now we have Ozolith, the Shattered Spire. For 1 and a green, we have a legendary artifact that gives us the Hardened Scales ability. If 1 or more 1/1 counters would be put on an artifact or creature we control, we instead put 1 more of those counters in addition to whatever we were going to put. It also has, for 1 and a green and tap, put a +1/+1 counter on an artifact or creature we control as a sorcery. So with its first ability, that replacement effect, it's pay 1 and a green and tap it and put 2 counters on something. Or if we had a different way to add more, put even more counters on it. And it also has cycling for 2 if we were to be really desperate for some card draw. When building this deck, I had several different ways of getting Hardened Scales effects out here. I cut some of them, and including original Hardened Scales, just because the Ozolith is so strong and it's legendary. Who wouldn't want it? So yes. Next up is Animar, Soul of Elements, a pretty fun commander in their own right. Animar is one of the more expensive cards we have in the deck. I've cut a lot of cards that I was considering just because of price concerns, because I try to keep my decks on the more budget-minded side. But Animar is really fun. For Teamer mana, a green, a blue, and a red, we get a 1/1 elemental with protection from white and black that says whenever you cast a creature spell, put a +1/+1 counter on Animar, and creature spells you cast cost 1 less for each 1/1 counter on Animar. So Animar is here to discount our other creatures, particularly our legends, and Animar is pretty good at protecting themselves, so yeah. Azusa Lost But Seeking is, man, I really like this card. It's a 1/2 human monk for 2 and a green that just lets us make 2 additional land drops every one of our turns. With the amount of cards we're drawing off of the Gay Kings and off of so many other things, as you'll see from all of our card draw, Azusa makes it so we are less likely to have to discard down to hand size, even if we don't have something that removes our hand size limit, just because we can drop plenty of our lands and keep ourselves going during our turns. Glunch the Bestower is a flumph from the Baldur's Gate set. For 1, a green and a white, we have an 0/5 jellyfish with flying that says, at the beginning of your end step, choose a player. They put 2 +1/+1 counters on a creature they control. Choose a second player to draw a card, then choose a third player to create 2 treasure tokens. So this is some of our group hug that remains in the deck. We can, if we want, get 2 1/1 counters on one of our creatures, maybe Halana and Alena, which translates to even more counters as time goes on. Or maybe we're willing to put those counters on someone else because we want to draw a card or we want to make some treasure. In any case, we do some group hug with this, and we can, as everyone knows, or maybe we don't, as you may not know, group hug is a great way to play politics at the table. You can say, it looks like you have a pretty strong board state. Why don't I make you a little stronger by putting counters on your creature? As long as you agree not to attack me, maybe you send it over to that guy or that other player. The same is true for the card draw and for the treasure tokens. Glunch is a lot of fun. Kellen joins up is a legendary enchantment. I tried to fit a Kellen card in this, and none of them really spoke to me for this deck. So this is our representation of Kellen in the story, or in the deck. At the party. For Bant mana, a green, a white, and a blue, we have an enchantment that when it enters the battlefield, we may exile a non-land card with mana value 3 or less from our hand, and it becomes plotted. Plotted means at sorcery speed on a later turn, we can cast it for free. So most of our deck is 3 mana or below. So Kellen joins up. It works for everything but lands and our few cards that are more expensive. It's pretty good just getting something out. Now we do have to wait for it, but sometimes patience is a virtue. More importantly, whenever a legendary creature enters the battlefield under our control, we put a +1/+1 counter on each creature we control. So we have a couple of instances of this as well, being able to put counters on all of our creatures. We have, I think in this section, 24 of these legends are creatures, but we also have our commanders. So we've got over 25 creatures that are going to trigger Kellen Joins Up. Kodama of the West Tree is a legendary spirit. It's a 3/3 for 2 and a green with reach that says modified creatures we control have trample. Now modified means it has an equipment attached to it, an aura we control attached to it, or most importantly, it has counters. And it also says whenever a modified creature we control deals combat damage to a player, we get to Rampant Growth. We search our library for a basic land and put it on the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. So Kodama of the West Tree most notably gives our creatures that have counters trample. So this is one of our sources of evasion in the deck. It also is going to ramp out some good basic lands. We went a little heavier on basics in this deck than we normally do. So I think Kodama is really going to be helpful. Next up, we have Lauren of the Third Path, perhaps in my mind the best Reclamation Sage. For 2 and a white, it's a 2/1 human artificer with vigilance. That when it enters, it destroys an artifact or enchantment, and then you can tap her to have you and an opponent draw a card. So a little bit more group hug there. Good removal, good card advantage as you go along. Yeah, Lauren's good. Next up, we have Rishkar, Pima Renegade. For 2 and a green, we have a 2/2 Elf Druid that when it enters, it puts a 1/1 counter on each of up to 2 target creatures. Now that can include itself, but you can't put both counters on the same creature. However, it makes it so every creature we have with a counter on it is a Llanowar Elf. We can tap it to add green. And we have plenty of creatures that we may not want to swing in with, like, well, Halana and Alena themselves, or the Gay Kings, because they're a great blocker. But if we're feeling like we don't need to block with that 2/8 body, we can always tap it for green mana. Green is our most prevalent color in this deck, so Rishkar is only going to help us from there. Rocco Street Chef is a little bit complicated from March of the Machine, The Aftermath. For Naya mana, a red, a green, and a white, we get a 2/4 Elf Druid that says, at the beginning of your end step, each player exiles the top card of their library, and until our next end step, each player may play the card they exiled this way. So in a way, we're drawing everyone a card. It's impulse draw, it's not actually in their hand, but everyone sees what everyone drew, and they're getting to play that card until our next end step. So essentially, they've got a turn to play it. And also, whenever a player plays a land from exile or casts a spell from exile, we put a +1/+1 counter on one of our creatures and we make a food token. So Rocco is triggering that second ability off of our opponent's playing land or casting spells from the card we had them exile. If they want to exile their own cards or have someone else exile their cards and then play those lands or cast those spells, Rocco will trigger from those as well, giving us counters, giving us food tokens. The food tokens are just a nice little bonus. It's a snack. What we care about are the counters and the card advantage, and even though it's pretty symmetrical, the perceived group hug nature of this card advantage. Rocco on his own can absolutely roll over people. I've certainly been defeated by Rocco Street Chef in the past. But in this deck, as long as we don't make him seem too scary, I think he will work very well. Much like Selvala, Explorer Returned. For 1 green and a white, we have a 2/4 Elf Scout with Parlay. We can tap Selvala to have every player reveal the top card of their library. That includes us. For each non-land card revealed this way, we put green in our mana pool and gain a life. Then every player draws a card, which of course is going to be that card. And if someone has, I don't know, Teferi's Ageless Insight, they might draw more because they're replacing the draw event with a double draw. But either way, everyone's going to be revealing the top card and putting it in their hand. We're going to gain some mana, possibly, and life, possibly. And either way, we're drawing a card because it includes us. Selvala is a lot of fun, and even though her ramp ability is a little variable, it's pretty fun. Her mana ability, I should say. So Torrens, Fist of the Angels, is another 1 and a green and a white, much like Selvala, for a 2/2 human cleric with training. Training is whenever this creature attacks with another creature with greater power, put a counter on this creature. So if Torrens attacks and you have Kodama of the West Tree, let's say, also attacking, Torrens will get a counter because Kodama of the West Tree's power is higher than Torrens's. But also, whenever you cast a creature spell, create a 1/1 green and white human soldier creature token with training. So we are a Legends deck. We're playing a lot of creatures. We have 33 creatures in the deck. And whenever we cast one of them while Torrens is out, we get a little friend, all of our little friends will grow as we go. So this is a good way for us to sort of simulate a go wide strategy. We're not really trying to go super wide, but we're not really not trying to go wide. Torrens helps us go even wider. Next up is another enchantment. Annie Joins Up, much like Kellen Joins Up. For 1, a red, a green, and a white, we get this legendary enchantment, and when it enters, it deals 5 damage to a creature or planeswalker our opponent controls. So this is another piece of nice removal. But more relevantly, if a triggered ability of a legendary creature we control triggers, it triggers an additional time. That's so much value. When Rishkar comes in, it will put a +1/+1 counter on up to 2 target creatures twice. At the beginning of our end step, Rocco will trigger twice. And when someone plays a land from exile or casts a spell from exile, Rocco will trigger twice again, and put 2 +1/+1 counters and make 2 foods. Selvala has an activated ability, so it's not a triggered ability. So it won't help Selvala a lot, but it sure will help Torrens for both of Torrens' abilities. Annie Joins Up doubles an awful lot of things. Most notably, it doubles the Gay King's end-step ability and Halana and Alena's start of combat ability. So we're getting twice as many counters with Halana and Alena, and Kynaios and Tiro are going to growth spiral us twice at the end of the turn, and our opponents are going to be able to make 2 plays of a land, draw 2 cards, 1 of each. Pretty good. So, we continue. Denry Klen, Editor-in-Chief. I'm very pleased with this card being in this deck. Denry Klen is a 2/2 cat advisor for 2, a white and a blue. When Denry enters, it comes in with a +1/+1 counter, or a first strike counter, or a vigilance counter. What I imagine we'll do is either first strike or vigilance is what I would be leaning toward. And it says, whenever a non-token creature we control enters, if Denry has counters on it, put the same number and kind of counters on the creature that entered. So Denry comes in with a vigilance counter, let's say. We go to combat, Halana and Alena trigger, and put 2 at least +1/+1 counters on Denry. Then we go to our second main and play another creature. That creature will come in with 2 +1/+1 counters and a vigilance counter because that's what Denry has. So we can really beef Denry up, and then everything else that we play is going to be at least as beefed up. If we want to go first strike, maybe first strike is what we're leaning toward. We can have much better blockers that way. Or we can have more blockers, in a sense, who are able to attack with our vigilance counter. And there's nothing wrong with just putting a 1/1 counter on Denry. I like this card. Joyro Weatherlight Captain, one of my favorite characters in Magic. 2, a blue and a red for a 3/3 human artificer that just says whenever you cast a historic spell, draw a card. So historic, for those who don't know, are artifacts, legendaries, and sagas. Now, we don't have any sagas in this deck, although I considered a few. We do have 8 artifacts. Some of them are creatures, but we have an awful lot of legends. We have 30 legends. The ones in this collection plus our commanders. So those legends plus, let's say 6, maybe 7 more, are all cantrips with Joyra out. We love Joyra. Megara the Diplomat also draws us cards. For 3 and a white, we get a 2/4 human cleric with lifelink that says whenever an opponent attacks with creatures, if 2 or more of those creatures are attacking us, we draw a card. Or whenever an opponent casts their second spell, we draw a card. So lots of ways for us to draw more cards as though we needed more card draw. But Megara is going to be helping dissuade our opponents from attacking us because they probably don't want to give us the card draw, especially because we're able to do so much with our cards. And if Megara has to block, Megara is probably not just a 2/4 if Halana and Alena have triggered and put some counters on them. Next up, we have Mrs. Bumbleflower, or Ms. Bumbleflower, pardon me. For 1 and Bant, a green, a white, and blue, we get a 1/5 Rabbit Citizen with Vigilance that says whenever you cast a spell, target opponent draws a card. Put a +1/+1 counter on target creature, it gains flying until end of turn. If this is the second time this ability has resolved this turn, you draw 2 cards. So let's break this down. Ms. Bumbleflower is a 1/5 with Vigilance, so she might attack, but mostly she's going to be blocking until we get some triggers. Whenever we cast a spell, and we're going to be casting a lot, we choose an opponent, we let them draw a card, then we put a +1/+1 counter on one of our creatures, and that creature gains flying. So +1/+1 and flying just because we cast a spell. And the second time we do that, we get another +1/+1 counter and flying until the end of turn, and we draw 2 cards. Now, if we cast a third spell, we get another +1/+1 counter and flying until end of turn on a creature. We don't draw any further cards throughout the turn. But just casting 2 spells means we replace those spells by drawing 2 cards. If we want to put that +1/+1 counter on Halana and Alena, that counter is just going to be transferred to something else when Halana and Alena trigger at the start of combat. Flying is also one of our good, our evasive ways of getting damage in. I don't know why I stopped in the middle of that sentence. Anyway, Ms. Bumbleflower is a big help in this, and it looks like she has a nice plate of baked goods. All right, Shalai, Voice of Plenty. 3 and a white for a 3/4 Angel from Dominaria, with flying, of course, that says you, planeswalkers you control, and other creatures you control have hexproof. So everything that's a creature, a planeswalker, and us, other than Shalai, has hexproof. So a big way of protecting us. In addition, if we need a mana sink, if we're not just powering through our spells and drawing more of them, for 4 and green, Shalai can put a 1/1 counter on all of our creatures, including herself. I think that's pretty great. Incredible art by Victor Adame Minguez. All right, we've got a Doctor Who card, the second Doctor. For 2, a white and a blue, we get a 2/4 Time Lord Doctor that says players have no maximum hand size. That's not just us. That's something we can also sell as a group hug thing. And then, the Doctor has the ability How Civil of You. At the beginning of my end step, each player may draw a card. Each opponent who does can't attack us or our permanents during their next turn. So this is another protective ability. but it's also a group hug ability. We're making it so everyone has no maximum hand size, and they're drawing a card. Now this triggers at the same time as the Gay Kings, so we can stack those triggers however we want. Even the choice of how we stack them can be a group hug sort of strategy. We can say to everyone, all right, I can have the second Doctor's trigger resolve first so that everyone draws a card, so you're more likely to have a card, have a land to put into play if you're looking for one when the Gay King's trigger resolves. Or I can have it go second if you already have a land in hand and you don't need it. Some people will say, well, I'm going to draw a card anyway if I don't make a land play from the Gay King's trigger, so I don't need to take it from the second Doctor. But man, Magic players like drawing cards, and this protects you if they're willing to. I think that's pretty great. We have Zegana, Utopian Speaker. 2, a green and a blue for a 4/4 Merfolk Wizard that, when it enters, if we control a creature with a +1/+1 counter on it, which I bet we will, we draw a card. So more card draw, more counter stuff. Sounds all right. Zegana gives each creature we control with a counter on it, with a 1/1 counter on it, that is, trample. So this is another great instance of evasion for us. But also, Zegana for 6 mana, if we have 6 mana lying around, we can adapt 4 to make her into an 8/8. Adapt only works if the creature has no counters on it already. So Zegana is one of the few creatures in the deck we might not want to target with the Gruul Friends. But there's nothing wrong if we want to. It would be a way to give Zegana trample, of course. So yeah. Next up, we have Chulane from Eldraine. Chulane is a human druid, a 2/4 human druid with vigilance for 2 and Bant, green and a white and a blue, that says whenever you cast a creature spell, draw a card, and then you may put a land from your hand onto the battlefield. It's just Growth Spiral again, the same thing that the Gay Kings essentially are for us. So we're getting a lot of card draw. We're going to be casting plenty of creature spells, so we'll get that card draw, and then we'll get our lands into play. It doesn't put it into play tapped, so we've got lots of lands that come in untapped, and we'll be able to use them right away. Chulane also says, for 3 and tap, return a creature we control to its owner's hand. So for some creatures that have enters effects, like Zegana, or if we wanted to take Denry Klin and reset the counter that Denry puts on themselves, we'd be able to do that with Chulane. But also, we're playing a creature again, so we get another free Growth Spiral from Chulane when we replay that creature. Next up is God Eternal Oketra. I really like this card. One day, I'm going to build this card as a commander deck of its own. For 3 and double white, we get a 3/6 zombie god with double strike. Whenever you cast a creature spell, create a 4/4 black zombie warrior creature token with vigilance. So a 4/4 with vigilance just for casting a creature spell in a deck that's built around creatures, I think that sounds pretty good, and synergizes pretty well with Chulane. Also, God Eternal Oketra, when it dies or is put into exile from the battlefield, we could instead put it, I guess not instead, but it moves to that other zone, and then we can move it back to our library, 3rd from the top. Can't get rid of God Eternal Oketra. God Eternal Oketra, which was an important character in defeating Nicol Bolas during War of the Spark. For all of you who care about the lore but haven't looked into it, I don't know who this is for. All right, Karametra, God of Harvests. For 3 a green and a white, we get a 6/7 god, which is an enchantment creature, and has Indestructible. Now, as long as our devotion to green and white is less than 7, Karametra isn't a creature, so she would just be an enchantment. Devotion, for those who don't know, means the number of colored pips among permanents we control. So Karametra herself, as you can see, or let's do Ms. Bumbleflower. She gives us 1 green devotion, 1 white devotion, and 1 blue devotion. Chulane gives us the same. Annie Joins Up gives a devotion of red, a green, and a white. So if we had all 3 of these cards in play, we would have devotion to red of 1, because there's only 1 red pip among them, devotion to white and green of 3, because all of them have a white and green pip, and devotion to blue of 2, because only Ms. Bumbleflower and Chulane have blue. Make sense? So if Karametra is in play, we need to have a total number of 7 white and or green pips. in order for Karametra to be a creature. Otherwise, she just sits there and is an enchantment and just sort of waits. But if we can get her online with that 7 devotion, we have a 6/7 indestructible god. In addition, this is why we care about Karametra in this, whenever we cast a creature spell, so the same trigger as Tulane, we can search our library for a Forest or Plains and put it on the battlefield tapped and shuffle. So we get a free rampant growth for a Forest or Plains. But it's not actually rampant growth because it doesn't say basic Forest or Plains. We have a couple of of lands in our deck that are dual typed. So we can go find one of them if we want to. Karametra is a big help here. Continuing with the 5 mana ones, Tatyova is a 3/3 Merfolk Druid for 3, a green, and a blue that has landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under our control, we gain a life and we draw a card. Tatyova is great. I'm a big fan of her, just providing us a lot of value. A little bit of incidental life gain doesn't hurt, and just drawing us cards, yeah. Keep in mind, landfall, I think this may be the first time we've seen it so far. Landfall's so important with the Gay Kings because we get to growth spiral with them every turn. Same thing with Tulane, of course, but every turn, guaranteed, if the Gay Kings are out, we draw a card and then we may put a land into play, which will trigger Tatyova even during our end step. I think that's pretty great. Next up, we have Annie Flash. I was able to get Annie into the deck because she joined up. So Annie Flash is a 4/5 human rogue with Flash, titularly. She costs 3, a red, a green, and a white. She says whenever she enters, if we cast her, we return a permanent with mana value 3 or less from our graveyard to the battlefield tapped. So we've got an awful lot of things in this deck that are mana value 3 or less. Many of them are permanents. If someone gets rid of it for us, that's all right. Annie can get it back for us, just straight to the battlefield. And whenever Annie becomes tapped, we exile the top 2 cards of our library and we can play them this turn. So unless they are something we can use during the end step, Annie wants us to be able to play them during our second main. We can't hang on to them, but this is a great way of saying, all right, start my turn, untap, upkeep, draw, go to combat, the Gruul Friends trigger, make Annie bigger, attack with Annie. When she becomes tapped, I get to exile 2 cards off the top of my library. Do you want to block this at least 6/7? No? Okay. Annie slams in, does her 6 damage. Oh, you chump blocked? That's fine. We move to the second main. We have 2 new cards essentially in our hand that we can cast. Now, those cards exiled, of course, we can't use with the Gay Kings. Actually, no, we can. What am I saying? So we'll draw a card with the Gay Kings, and then we may put a land from our hand into play, so I guess it doesn't work. Either way, we've got 2 more cards. Annie's a good time. We've also got Monty Paul, another Thunder Junction card. For 3, a green, and 2 blue, we have a 6/5 Giant Scout with reach. And when she comes in, she makes Bow, a legendary blue ox token with power and toughness equal to the number of lands we control. We are making probably 2 land drops every turn that we have the lands in hand, thanks to the Gay Kings. So Bonnie Paul is going to be making a very large ox. In addition, Bonnie Paul says whenever we attack, draw a card, and then we may put a land card from our hand or the graveyard onto the battlefield. So this is another growth spiral, but it's even better because our land can come from the graveyard if we have used, say, an Evolving Wilds or something. We can bring it right back. It doesn't say tapped either. So it's the same thing as growth spiral or what Tulane does, just also from the graveyard. Next up, we have Hamza, Guardian of Arashin. Hamza is a 5/5 elephant warrior for 4, a green, and a white, but it costs 1 less for each creature we control with a 1/1 counter on it. Hamza is a 6 mana card that we're probably never paying 6 mana for. By the time we would get to Hamza, probably the Gruul Friends have triggered and we've got at least something with counters on it. Hamza also says creature spells we cast cost 1 less for each creature we control with a 1/1 counter on it. So Hamza has this cost reduction ability and shares it with all of our other creatures because we want our people to work together. We're all here at the same party. This is great. Next we have the Locust God, or I think last we have the Locust God in this section. The Locust God for 4, a blue, and a red is a 4/4 god with flying. Whenever we draw a card, we make a 1/1 blue and red insect creature token with flying and haste. That works when we draw a card during our draw step and when we draw a card during our end step due to the Gay Kings. The Locust God also lets us pay 2, a blue and a red, to draw a card and discard a card, which gives us a little bit of card selection, but it also triggers its other ability, making another 1/1 flying hasty insect. Finally, when the Locust God dies, we put it back in our hand at the beginning of the next end step. So that's a delayed trigger. It'll go on the stack at the same time as the trigger from the Gay Kings. We get to keep the Locust God rolling. That's great. All right, let's move on to the other big theme, which is counters. All right. As usual, we're going to go over the cards we haven't seen yet. Starting with Bard class. Bard class is a class enchantment. So for a red and a green, we get an enchantment with an ability. And then at sorcery speed, we can pay to level it up to the next ability and then the final ability. So its first ability is legendary creatures we control enter the battlefield with a 1/1 counter on them. Just a great way to get things started, especially with Halana and Alena. They will enter as a 3/4 because they have a counter on them. Then their ability triggers, we put 3 counters on something. Terrific. We can level it up to level 2 for the same cost, a red and a green. Legendary spells you cast costs red and green less to cast. This effect only reduces the amount of colored mana you pay. So, for example, Animar, as you can see right here, costs a green, a blue, and a red. If we've leveled the Bard class up to level 2, Animar only costs a blue. And that applies to every one of our legendary spells. Finally, the third level is for 3, a red and a green. Whenever you cast a legendary spell, exile the top 2 cards of your library. You may play them this turn. So it's the same thing that any flash does by getting tapped. We just get ourselves a little bit of card advantage. Next up is a removal spell, Domri's Ambush. For red and a green, we have a sorcery that puts a 1/1 counter on one of our creatures, and then that creature deals damage equal to its power to a creature or planeswalker we don't control. It's just a bite, but it's a bite that comes with a free counter. I think that's pretty good. We've seen the Ozolith, so let's talk about Roaring Earth. For 1 and a green, we get an enchantment with Landfall, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature or vehicle we control. No vehicles in this deck, so this is just Landfall, put a 1/1 counter on something. That's great, even just to put on on any of our creatures, but if we put it on the Girlfriends, they're going to be able to turn that 1 counter into more counters, at least 1 more, with their beginning of combat trigger. In addition, with Roaring Earth, if we don't want to cast it, we can channel it. For X green and discard it, we can put X 1/1 counters on a land we control to make it into a 0/0 green spirit creature with haste that's still a land. So it's a 0/0, but it has all these counters, so it doesn't immediately die. We're going to be able to do that if we need maybe, I don't know, a surprise blocker. We've saved a whole bunch of mana after our turn, and we've swung out, and our opponent swings back at us. We pump all that mana into one of our lands. Maybe the land dies, maybe it just chump blocks, maybe it kills something. Having the flexibility with that is pretty great. Roaring Earth on its own, I would mostly play just as the enchantment, but having it in our hand late game so that we can channel it and get ourselves a surprise creature that's got counters on it with all of our counter synergies, hard to say no to that. So, Simic Ascendancy, we're going to come back to this because we got a little section for this later. We've seen Animar, now Broker's Ascendancy. For a green, a white, and a blue, we get an enchantment that says at the beginning of your end step, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control, and a loyalty counter on each planeswalker you control. There's no planeswalkers in this deck. So this is just 3 mana, put a counter on all your creatures at the end of turn. Seems pretty good. Champion of Lambholt. This is a major piece of evasion for us. If you've watched my prior videos, you'll know about this one from the Only Friends deck with Rurik Thar and Kambal. So Champion of Lambholt, for 1 green, we get a 1/1 human warrior that says creatures with power less than Champion of Lambholt's power can't block creatures we control. And whenever another creature enters the battlefield under our control, Champion of Lambholt gets a 1/1 counter. So Champion of Lambholt makes it so our creatures are not blockable by creatures that have a power less than Champion of Lambholt's. So as long as Champion of Lambholt is big, all of our things are unblockable. Halana and Alena are going to make all of our things big, including Champion of Lambholt. It's a great place to put it. And worst case scenario, making Champion of Lambholt really big, that's removal bait. That makes it so we are going to swing and we are going to win unless they kill the champion, rather than something else, probably. I think that works pretty well. Next up, we have Fight Rigging. Fight Rigging is an enchantment for 2 and a green with Hideaway 5. So when it enters, we look at the top 5 of our library, exile 1 face down under this, and put the rest on the bottom in a random order. Fight Rigging says at the beginning of combat on our turn, we put a 1/1 counter on a creature we control. So that's the same thing as, the same time rather, as Halana and Alena, which means we could put this on Halana and Alena, even though the triggers go on the stack at the same time and they both target at the same time. Let's say we have Champion of Lambholt out. Halana and Alena will, at the start of combat, will trigger at the same time as Fight Rigging. Fight Rigging targets Halana and Alena. Halana and Alena target the champion. We stack the triggers in such a way so that Fight Rigging resolves first. When it resolves, Halana and Alena's power goes up from the 1/1 counter, and then their trigger resolves and puts an additional counter more than it would have on Champion of Lambholt because it has a new power. Obviously, you can put this on something else, but just good synergy there. But we're not done with that one ability. So at the beginning of combat, we put a 1/1 counter on target creature we control, and then if we control a creature, doesn't have to be the same one, with power 7 or greater, we can play the exiled card without paying its mana cost. So hopefully, we've gotten something pretty great under Fight Rigging. And also hopefully, we play Fight Rigging, go immediately to combat, have it trigger, and are able to play that great thing. Yeah, good card. We're back to Glunch. We know Glunch. Kami of Whispered Hopes is, I believe, the other source of Hardened Scales in our deck. For 2 and a green, we get a 1/1 spirit that says Hardened Scales. If one or more 1/1 counters would be put on a permanent we control, that many +1 1/1 counters are put on that permanent instead. But also, Kami taps for X mana of any one color, where X is its power. So a huge ramp piece. If we have just this out on turn 3, and then turn 4, we get the Gruul Friends out. Gruul Friends are able to trigger and put 2 counters on the Kami, but it won't be 2 because the Kami's ability replaces it and makes it 3. Now the Kami is a 4/4. We don't need to attack with it. We can go to our second main and tap it for 4 mana. That's crazy ramp. We've seen Kellen joins up. Ooh, Resourceful Defense. I'm really excited about this. This is such a cool card. People who know me know I love New Capenna, and the New Capenna Commander decks gave us so many cool cards. So Resourceful Defense is 2 and a white for an enchantment that says whenever a permanent you control leaves the battlefield, if it had counters on it, put those counters on target permanent you control. It doesn't say whenever a creature leaves, put them on a creature. So they could go on Resourceful Defense if you want. So this is in here as our Ozolith, because the Ozolith itself is so expensive. So if we've put, those 3 counters on the Kami of Whispered Hopes, and someone kills the Kami, we could take those 1/1 counters and put them on Glunch, or put them on Resourceful Defense, or put them on Fight Rigging. It doesn't matter. Then, with Resourceful Defense, we can pay 4 and a white to move any number of counters from target permanent we control to another target permanent we control. So it's not the same as the Ozolith in that it doesn't automatically move those counters after it stores them, but it does automatically store them immediately. Like we could move it from Kami of Whispered Hopes to Glunch when Kami of Whispered Hopes leaves the battlefield. Or if we don't have a creature to put it on, or a creature we want to put those counters on, we can just store it on Resourceful Defense or one of our other non-creature permanents, or one of our lands. It doesn't say non-creature, doesn't say non-land permanents. It only means we'd have to pay 4 and a white later on to move them off of it. Still pretty great. Rhythm of the Wild. This is a card that is worth every dollar. For 1, a green, and a red, we get an enchantment that says our creature spells can't be countered, and our non-token creatures have Riot. Riot means it enters with a 1/1 counter or haste. that is not a triggered ability. It enters with those counters. So it does count as putting those counters on it, however. So if we have Kami of Whispered Hopes, or the Ozolith, the Shattered Spire, not the original Ozolith, of course, in play, and we have our Hardened Scales effect, Rhythm of the Wild will put 2 counters on as the creature enters. This is just, stopping us from having our creature spells countered is pretty great in a deck like this, but just ensuring that everything has like 1/1 counter, even if that thing is the Gruul Friends, pretty great. We've seen Rishkar and Rocco. We've seen these two. It's Felidar Retreat. For 4 and a white, we have an enchantment with Landfall. Whenever land enters, we either make a 2/2 white Cat Beast creature token, or we put a +1/+1 counter on each creature we control, and they all gain Vigilance until end of turn. Felidar Retreat. Man, I've lost to this card so many times. What's especially good about this is the flexibility. We can, during our end step, we get our Growth Spiral effect from the Gay Kings. We put a land into play, assuming we have one, and maybe we need a creature, so we get a cat. Maybe we want counters, which we always want. So we'll put counters on everything, and the Vigilance doesn't help, but it's just a free counter on everything. And if we were able to make a land drop before combat, maybe that Vigilance does matter to us. So Felidar Retreat, big help here. Forgotten Ancient is next, Mr. Baby Cakes himself. For 3 and a green, we have an 0/3 elemental that says whenever a player casts a spell, you may put a 1/1 counter on Forgotten Ancient. Whenever a player casts a spell, it's not just us. So Mr. Baby Cakes, which is the playtest name, I believe, for Forgotten Ancient, he's legendary to me. It's legendary to me. Whenever Forgotten Ancient gets a counter, or whenever someone casts a spell, Forgotten Ancient's going to get a counter. So it's going to build up a lot of counters over the course of a turn cycle, even if they're just from us. Then, at the beginning of our upkeep, we may move any number of 1/1 counters from Forgotten Ancient onto other creatures. It doesn't target. It can be split up, or you can put them all on one. That's great. Maybe Forgotten Ancient starts as an 0/3, we pass the turn, and by the time it gets back to us, it's a 5/8. We put all 5 counters on Halana and Alena. We go to combat. Halana and Alena puts those counters right back on Forgotten Ancient, so now we've just doubled our counters. And we could do it again next turn, assuming they both survive. Pretty good. Next up is a card from the Duskmourn Commander decks, Giggling Skitterspike. For 4 mana, we get a 1/1 toy that is indestructible. So it's an artifact creature. So this is something that will trigger Joyra, because it's not legendary, but it is an artifact. So a 1/1 indestructible for 4 that says whenever it attacks, blocks, or becomes the target of a spell, it deals damage equal to its power to each opponent. And it has Monstrosity 5 for 5 mana. So that's 9 mana all told to be able to give yourself a 6/6. But it's a 6/6 indestructible that hits each opponent for 6 every time it attacks or blocks or becomes the target of a spell. That's not target of an ability, unfortunately, but we can make it monstrous. It's not the same as adapt like we saw before. We can make it monstrous before or after it's had counters put on it by the Gruul Friends. So the Gruul Friends trigger, maybe there's nothing else going on. Giggling Skitterspike is already a 3/3 indestructible. It attacks, everyone takes 3, which is a free lightning bolt to everyone. And it only gets better from there. Anyway, we also have 20-Toed Toad. This is another card we're going to come back to. And Last Night Together. This is also just a really fun Doctor Who card. For 3, a red and a green. This is some good flavor. We have a sorcery. Choose 2 target creatures. Untap them. Put 2 +1/+1 counters on each of them. They gain Vigilance, Indestructible, and Haste until end of turn. After this main phase, there is an additional combat phase. Only the chosen creatures can attack during that combat phase. So here's how this plays out. We pick, let's say, our commanders, the Gruul Friends and the Gay Kings. They are roommates, they are taking care of each other. We untap them. We put 2 1/1 counters on each of them. They get Vigilance and Indestructible and Haste until end of turn, and then we pass pass to the end of the phase, and we get a combat phase. So if this is our pre-combat main phase, we go to combat. The Gruul Friends trigger. They put counters on the Gay Kings, since only the Gruul Friends and Gay Kings can attack during this combat phase. But the counters they put on them supplement the 2 counters they already got, or the Kings already got, and are supplemented by the 2 counters that the Gruul Friends got. They all attack. They have Vigilance, so they're not tapped. They have Indestructible, so we don't have to be worried about them getting hurt. Then we pass to the end of that combat phase, and we go to our actual combat phase. So, because that was an additional combat phase there. But what if we wanted to do this after combat? We've already had our first main phase and our combat phase, and during our second main, we cast Last Night Together. Let's say we target the same creatures. The Gay Kings, the Gruul Friends, if they're tapped, they untap, they get counters, they get Vigilance, Indestructible, Haste if they need it, and we go to an additional combat phase where only they can attack. But that's still pretty great. If it was during our first main phase, maybe our 2 creatures cleared the way for our second main phase. The same can be true for our regular attack. I'm sorry, not main phase. If it was our first main phase and we cast this, maybe our 2 creatures clear the way for our second combat phase. But if we cast this during our second main, it was the original combat that our opponents got to see. They don't know that we have an extra combat step that we're going to be going to, or extra combat phase we're going to be going to after our second main. And it doesn't matter really that only 2 of our creatures can attack during it, because even if those creatures, like big things like Hamza or anything that's gotten pumped up by the Gruul Friends, even if it's tapped and has taken damage, it becomes indestructible and has Vigilance, and it can only attack with one other thing. But don't you want to go into death hand in hand? And you're not going to die because you're indestructible. Last Night Together is just a really fun card. I love putting just a handful of fun cards in that may not be optimal choices. There may be better choices, but they're just a good time. Last Night Together is definitely one of those. So let's move on to our support cards. Now, astute viewers or watchers, audience members, whomever you are, will know that I use the word draw just to represent card advantage. They may not all be draw. So the first one is a removal spell. Arcane Denial. For 1 and a blue, we counter a spell, and its controller may draw up to 2 cards at the beginning of the next turn's upkeep, and we also draw a card at the beginning of next turn's upkeep. So it's a little more restrictive, or a little less restrictive cost than actual factual counterspell, but it also replaces itself, and it gives our opponent some cards. They'll probably not be that happy that we have taken away their 1 card, but at least we replace it with 2. So, Group Hug? Maybe not, but at least it works. We've talked about Bard class and how it doesn't really give us draw, but it does give us the ability to exile cards when we cast a legendary spell. So that's card advantage. Hunter's Talent is next. It does a lot for us. For 1 and a green, when it enters, target creature we control deals damage equal to its power to target creature we don't control. It's a bite effect, so we're not even risking our creature. Then we can level it up, much like this Bard class, for an additional 1 and a green, to whenever you attack, target attacking creature gets +1/+0 and gains trample until end of turn. Now keep in mind, whenever you attack is the attack step. That's not the same as the beginning of combat. So this will trigger not at the same time as the Gruul Friends. The Gruul Friends will get counters on something else, and then when that something else attacks, it will get the +1/+0. Because it's not at the same time, you're not going to be able to do something like, I attack with the Gruul Friends, haha, I put this on them, and now their power is higher, so we can put counters on something else. They are different steps. The beginning of combat step is when the Gruul Friends trigger, the Declare Attacker step is when Hunter's Talent triggers, so don't get confused. Finally, for 3 and a green, level 3 is at the beginning of your end step. If you control a creature with power 4 or greater, draw a card. That is the same time as the Gay King's end step trigger. So we can stack it however we like, as with before. We can draw a card, then have the Gay King's trigger draw us another card and let us put a land into play. That's probably the best way to do it, because we might draw a card from Hunter's Talent first. But if we have one of the cards that increases our hand size or removes it altogether, we don't have to worry about it. We can do whatever order we want. Hunter's Talent, a lot of fun. We've seen Fight Rigging and Glunch and Lauren and all of the rest of these. We've seen these. We haven't seen 20 Toad. Don't worry, we're going to get there. And now Rishkar's Expertise. For 4 green, we draw cards equal to the greatest power among creatures we control. 6 mana is a lot. We're going to have so many counters on our creatures. We're going to be drawing, I'd be surprised if we only draw 6 cards. And then we may cast a spell with mana value 5 or less from our hand without paying its mana cost. So we get to cast something for free. Free spell? Is that spell likely to be worth 6 mana? Maybe not. Is it likely to be worth less than 6 mana and gain us a bunch of cards? Almost certainly. Rishkar's Expertise is a great card that I put into a lot of green decks. So, next up, we have our ramp section. Pretty briefly, everyone knows Soul Ring and why it's good. For 1 mana, you add 2 mana, 2 colorless mana. Hard to say no to Soul Ring. Same thing is true for Arcane Signet, because for 2 mana we get a rock that taps for any one of the 4 colors in our commander's color identity. We're set. We've seen Bard class. Farseek is for 1 and a green. We search our library for a plains, island, swamp, or mountain and put it on the battlefield tapped and then shuffle. Again, it does not have to be a basic. So we can get a basic for any one of the 3 colors that we want. From here, obviously we don't have a swamp that we want. But we have a couple of dual-typed lands, and if you want to upgrade the deck, you can put more in that lets you find whatever you need, whatever colors you need that is also a plains, an island, or a mountain. Farseek is a good include in here. I always put Felwar Stone in my decks that are at least 3 colors. It's fine in fewer colored decks, but it's a 2 mana rock that's going to tap for at least one of the colors we're in. I would be really surprised to sit down at a table with this deck and 3 opponents that are all playing mono black, and it can't help us. But even then, it's a 2 mana rock that taps for a black. We can use that to pay for generic mana. It may not be Arcane Signet, but a lot of the time, it generally is. Chromatic Lantern solves our problems entirely. It gives our lands the ability to tap for mana of any color, and it also taps for mana of any color. So, fixes our mana almost perfectly, including with our lands that don't tap for colored mana at all. Next up we have Cultivate. Cultivate seems like it might be an interesting choice here when we could have run Farseek and Nature's Lore and even just Rampant Growth. But Cultivate is particularly good in this deck. For 2 and a green, we search our library for up to 2 basic lands, reveal them, put 1 on the battlefield tapped and the other in our hand, and then shuffle. Why Cultivate is so great is because it gets both of those lands into play due to the Gay King's instep trigger. It's not the same thing as having our other land enter untapped and letting us use that during our turn, but it's still better than an Explosive Vegetation variant, where we would be paying a total of 4 mana to get 2 basics onto the battlefield tapped during our turn. This just sets us up for having a land in hand that we're able to use to just get into play during the end step. I think it's pretty great. Next up we have Decanter of Endless Water. This is in here to be a Manolith, a 3 mana artifact that taps for 1 of any color, that also gives us no maximum hand size. I went back and forth on this versus the 2 mana rock that is the same as this but taps for 1 mana of color, 1 colorless mana. I decided to go with this because we are in a little bit of a color intensive deck, or at least a broadly colored deck, so I'd rather have my mana be fixed than be able to get this out a turn earlier. So we've seen Glunch and Kami. We've seen the rest of all of these. Good. This is all of our ramp cards. I know you've been noting like, wow, that's 19 ramp cards. But if you take out all the legends, it's actually fewer. So I put it sort of in the middle just because we are going to want a lot of ramp in this deck. And many of these cards are doing things other than just ramping us. So next we have our interaction. Again, it's not all removal. It's just what I call my interaction section. We have Path to Exile and Swords to Plowshares. Great spells. They're both instants. They both cost a white. They both exile a target creature. Path to Exile lets the creature's controller Rampant Growth. Swords to Plowshares give that creature's controller life equal to the creature's power. And then another 1 mana instant, also a white. You cannot pass. You cannot pass. Destroy target creature that blocked or was blocked by a legendary creature this turn. So this can be played during combat before combat damage is dealt. And it probably should be, kill something that's blocking your creature or that your creature is blocking to save your creature. Or if you want to, you can wait if your creature is something you're willing to sacrifice, or if your creature is not going to die anyway, like maybe it's the Gay Kings and it's doing 2 damage but taking less than 8, so it's not going to die. You could play You Cannot Pass later in the turn because maybe your opponent is playing like a sacrifice heavy deck and they have decided to, during their second main phase, or after combat at least, spend their mana doing anything other than sacrificing the creature that they attacked with. You don't want to have to deal with it later, so you don't have to do this before combat damage. You can do it anytime you like, as long as it's met those qualifications during that turn. We've seen Arcane Denial and Domri's Ambush and Hunter's Talon, Animist's Might. I have a soft spot for this card. It's 2 and a green for target creature you control deals damage equal to twice its power to target creature or planeswalker you don't control, but this spell costs 2 less if it targets a legendary creature you control. So for 1 green, you're double biting a creature or planeswalker of your opponent's. And you may not need that doubling with all the counters in here, but might as well take it. Grasp of Fate. I specifically chose the Commander Master's art for this because it's Theros, which is where the Gay Kings are from. 1 and 2 white for an enchantment that, when it enters the battlefield, for each opponent, exile up to 1 target non-land permanent that player controls until Grasp of Fate leaves the battlefield. So it's Banishing Light. It's an Oblivion Ring for non-lands, but it hits 1 from every opponent. Now that's putting a lot of your eggs in one basket, but I don't think that that's a terrible plan. We've got plenty of repeatable removal in this. Having something that's not quite a Wrath, I think that's good. And of course, we've seen Lauren, and Annie joins up. Next up, we have our own Wrath. Wave Goodbye. It's a deck with the Gay Kings in it, so I didn't want to just kill everything. So our Wrath is 2 blue for a sorcery that bounces each creature that doesn't have a +1/+1 counter on it. Now that might hit our creatures too, but in all likelihood, most of our creatures are going to have counters on them. Many of our creatures are going to have counters at least. So putting a bunch of things back in our opponent's hands, maybe a few of our own, maybe some of our opponents stay, it's more gentle than a typical Wrath. So since we're here, let's talk about our Wincons, these 2 cards that I said we'd come back to. I call these things Wincons, not because they're the only way to win, but because they're an alternative. Simic Ascendancy is an enchantment for a green and a blue that says for 1 a green and a blue, we can put a 1/1 counter on a creature we control. But more relevantly, whenever we put 1 or more +1/+1 counters on a creature we control, we put that many growth counters on Simic Ascendancy, and during our upkeep, if Simic Ascendancy has 20 or more growth counters, we win the game. There's a lot of easy ways for us to win with Simic Ascendancy in this deck, from the Gruul Friends to things that put counters on all of our creatures, to just Simic Ascendancy's own ability, which we can activate during the end step of another player's turn, which may push us all the way up to where we need to be. But it does give everyone a chance to interact with it before it happens, because it triggers during our upkeep. Pretty fair. Similarly, 20-Toed Toad is 3 and a blue for a 3/3 Frog Wizard that makes our maximum hand size 20. So this is the card in the deck that doesn't give us an unlimited hand size. It sets it at 20, which is a fifth of our deck. We're fine. It says whenever you attack with 2 or more creatures, put a 1/1 counter on 20-Toed Toad and draw a card. And whenever 20-Toed Toad attacks, you win the game if there are 20 or more counters on it, or you have 20 or more cards in hand. Us being able to get 20 cards in hand is not that hard, but us putting 20 counters on it is absolutely doable. We might have this on our opening hand, let's say, and we shape our first 8 to 10 turns of the game, getting the Gruul Friends big enough that when 20-Toed Toad hits the battlefield, maybe we have Rhythm of the Wild in play, and instead of a counter, we give it haste, we attack with it, we put a bunch of counters on it from the Gruul Friends, maybe 19 counters, And then we have 2 attack triggers for 20-toed toad. And I guess we'd have to put 20 on there because there's an if. I don't think that's an intervening if. Rules knowers of my viewers, tell me in the comments if 20-toed toad has 2 triggers because we're attacking with it and at least one other thing, if it can put the 20th counter on itself with its first or with its second ability and then have its third ability trigger and we win the game. In either case, we're building up a creature to be a 23/23 and then attacking with it, and we just win by having declared it as an attacker. Much easier to interact with for our opponents, so it's removal bait. It's a little bit of a red herring, or a blue herring perhaps, a blue frog, a blue tadpole, there we go. But it seems like a lot of fun. Other cards. We have some Evasion in here, which we've seen almost all of. We haven't seen Abzan Falconer. For 2 and a white, it's a 2/3 human soldier with Outlast 1, which means as a sorcery we can pay, or Outlast a white. As a sorcery we can pay a white and tap it to put a counter on it. But more relevantly, each creature we control with a 1/1 counter on it has flying. So this is our last big evasion piece that we haven't seen yet. Being able to put a bunch of counters on something with the Gruul Friends and then slam it in the air, or maybe it's the Gay Kings we've put the counters on and we just have a big flying blocker. Hard not to like that. So we've seen all the other evasion pieces. We also have seen all of our protection. My keyboard is angry. There we go. We've seen all 3 of these already. The reason I've got a second section for it here is because we have the considering section. Considering are cards that I thought about putting in but decided against. There's an awful lot down here, and this is in every one of my decks, so I recommend you check that out if you want to power up or power down your version of this deck. There are definitely protection spells in there that are non-legendary creatures. So finally, let's look at our lands. We're starting off with 21 basics. As you can see, 9 forests, 3 islands, 5 mountains, 4 plains. Our mana sort of mix for this deck, we've mostly got land, or green rather, and we're hurting on red, which is unfortunate because both of our commanders are red. So I tried to make an emphasis on red land sources, and our mana production for that is higher than even blue, which is we've got more of. But of course these don't add up to 100% because there are multiple sources that will produce multiple different colors. This is our curve, by the way, if you're interested. So we are taking a look at our lands. Like I said, we've got these 21 basics. I wanted us to focus more on basics for this so that there's a place to grow from it. And also so we have plenty of things we can search for if we need to with our fixing lands. Here we go. So we've got several different ways of fixing our mana. Command Tower, everyone knows. It's a land that taps for one of the colors in our commander's color identity. Path of Ancestry does the same thing. It comes in tapped, but if we spend it to cast a creature spell that shares a creature type with our commander, we scry one. We have an awful lot of humans in this deck. So 11 total humans, 2 of which are our commanders. That's, more than 10% of our deck. So Path of Ancestry, at the very least, is a tapped command tower. That's great. We also have Path of Ancestry, or not Path of Ancestry, I'm sorry, Exotic Orchard, which is Fellwarstone as a land. We're likely going to be at least producing 2 of the colors we care about from this, maybe even all 4. We also have Plaza of Heroes, one of our expensive lands. It taps for colorless, or 1 mana of any color that we can only cast legendary spells with, or 1 mana of any color among legendary permanents we control. Pretty quickly, once we get the Gay Kings out, this is a command tower that also has the ability, pay 3, tap, and exile it. Target legendary creature gains hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. It protects our things as well. Plaza of Heroes, terrific, include in this deck. We also have 3 soft fetches. Evolving Wilds, everyone knows Evolving Wilds, tap it, sack it, rampant growth. But we also have 2 of these sack lands from Modern Horizons 3. They are both able to find our 2 most sort of relevant colors, which is green and red. So green and red relevant because most of our spells are green. Red relevant because it is the least represented, but it's important to have it for the Gruul friends. Otherwise, they're the same thing. One can also find a plains, one can find an island. Either way, they tap for colorless, or we can tap and sack them and do the Evolving Wilds thing for one of the 3 colors they're in. And if it's late in the game and we really need to, we can cycle them for 3 mana of the colors that are produced by the basic lands that they can find. Next up, we have some Tango lands. I like the Tango lands. They are slow lands in that they enter the battlefield tapped unless we control 2 or more basics. We've got lots of basics, so that's not a problem. But also, they're typed. So if Karametra is in play, she can find a forest or a plains, which is any of these 3. If you're looking for blue mana, Karametra can find you this prairie stream because it is a plains. We can, if we want, upgrade these to shock lands or surveil lands, much like we can take these fixing lands and upgrade the soft fetches with actual fetches, or even something just like Fabled Passage. Next up, we have some tri-lands. The tri-lands are just the best form of tapped fixing we can get, because it's going to, each of them, make 3 of the colors that we're in. We can upgrade these with triomes, of course. And then finally, we have some utility lands, just a few. Gavany Township taps for colorless, but we can pay 2 a green and a white and tap this to put a 1/1 counter on each creature we control. So if we're desperate for counters, we can have it in our land base. Mosswort Bridge is another hideaway card with Hideaway 4. It comes in tapped, but taps for green, and we can pay a green and tap it to cast the Exiled card if we have a total power among our creatures of 10 or greater. We will. With all the counters we've got, we will. Maybe Gavany Township works us into Mosswort Bridge and casting that the card that's under it. And then finally, Reliquary Tower. Taps for colorless, gives us no maximum hand size. Just one more way for us to hold all of our cards in our hand. We can upgrade these with Surveil lands or Scry lands. I think that all of these are pretty good choices. Maybe Reliquary Tower would go away in place of something else, but there's lots of different ways we can go with our land base, and it generally will work for us. So I encourage you to take a look at this deck, see what you think of it, see how you want to upgrade it, and how you would celebrate Pride with the Gay Kings and the Gruul friends. That about sums it up. Again, Magic Presents Pride. Those events are going to be happening this coming weekend. So Friday, Saturday, Sunday from June 27th to 29th. It'll just be one of those days. So check with your FLGS for their event and go ahead and get brewing. Thanks for watching, everyone. Make sure to like and subscribe. And remember, Magic is fun. You should play more Magic.